Another thing I wanted to get from you, Matt, is what's the role of the drug trade in fueling this conflict?
So let's go back to the beginnings of this war in the 1980s. At that point, Afghanistan produces poppy crops, but they are predominantly internal consumption. They don't produce enough to export. The CIA and the Pakistani ISI, the Pakistani Intelligence Service, and at that point, because the British had brought the crop into India, and India at that point had included Pakistan, right? So there are poppy crops in Pakistan. The American CIA and the Pakistani ISI bring that crop into Afghanistan in the 1980s to produce for export in order to help fund the war against the Soviet Union. The men who own those crops are the warlords who the United States has put in power since 2001. More importantly, when the Taliban come to power in the 1990s, by the time September 11th has come by, the Taliban has reduced, they didn't eradicate it, but they reduced the poppy growth in Afghanistan to a level where there was really no exports. It was insignificant. The Americans come in, we put back into power these warlords who own these poppy fields, or who used to own these poppy fields, who have become wealthy off of it. And now, of course, and for most of the last decade, because it grows, but for, at least since 2008, 2009, Afghanistan has provided 80 to 90% of the world's illicit opiates. Anytime anyone says, well, what's this war got to do with people here in the United States? I don't really think that the war in Afghanistan affects us here. Well, we just had 93,000 people die from opiate overdose last year in this country. 80% of the world's opiates are consumed by Americans. There is a very real connection between that explosion in opiate growth or poppy growth in Afghanistan and the consumption of opiates, not just in the United States, but around the world. So I think that's a good example for people to understand how these wars affect us here at home, how they do come home. But one of the things, a story I can tell you all about, the man I mentioned before, Gul Agha Shirzai. By the time I get to Afghanistan, he is in Jalalabad, the same city I was in, and he is the governor. And Jalalabad, Nangarhar province is where Jalalabad is, and Jalalabad and Nangarhar control the most important border crossing for Afghanistan, what's called Torkham Gate, with Pakistan. So this is a very lucrative position. But anyway, we have this program. It's called the Governor's Eradication Program. And the idea is that we're going to give cash money. We, the United States, are going to give cash money to these governors to get them to eradicate the poppy crops. Gul Agha Shirzai's family still has vast swaths of poppies in Kandahar down the south. He's up in Nangarhar. So what does Shirzai do? He goes to the poppy growers, to the drug lords in Nangarhar, who are also allied with us, by the way. But he goes to them, he shakes them down. He says, either you cooperate with me or I'm going to eradicate your fields. And those who call his bluff, he goes to the Americans and turns in those fields, and those fields are eradicated. So what do we do for shaking down his fellow drug lords, for consolidating his share? For increasing his share of the drug production in Afghanistan, right? For rubbing out his competition, we give him $10 million cash. I mean, that is how the American war on narcotics unfolded in Afghanistan. Wow. The lie that the Taliban was the driving force behind the drug trade in Afghanistan was exactly that. Certainly, yes, there are Taliban involved with the drug trade. Of course, the drug trade is the only industry in Afghanistan. That's it. So the Taliban, of course, are going to be involved to some degrees. They're going to tax. They're an insurgency. They're going to tax whatever they can tax. They're going to tax the drug trade. However, the major players, the drug lords, the people who have controlled the Afghan drug trade for these last 20 years are the U.S. allies. When I was there, the biggest drug lord in Afghanistan, because he controlled the drug trade in Kandahar, was President Hamid Karzai's brother, Ahmed Wali Karzai. Ahmed Wali Karzai was the governor of Kandahar, which is the second most populous province, second largest city in the country. And he was the largest. And that was the man who was in charge of he was the Scarface of southern Afghanistan, and he was our ally. I mean, so understanding those kinds of lies, because so much during that time, you heard about the narco-terror nexus, right? This connection. And again, yeah, the Taliban were involved in the drug trade. These last several years, some of the heaviest fighting you've seen in the south of Afghanistan has been trying, one side or another, trying to gain control of the poppy fields in the south. That's why some of the violence has been so bad. But yeah, the understanding of who the Taliban actually are, and to make it even more nefarious, Crystal and Kyle, to really show how the United States is involved in this, why the United States is involved, the lies of it all. Yes, the Taliban got a significant part of their income from the drug trade. However, of their major funding sources, that was number 4. The third most important revenue stream from them was from siphoning off American contracts, right? Either receiving contracts directly or shaking people down. I used to go visit these small outposts in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan, totally surrounded by Taliban. You'd ask these kids, these lieutenants and captains who were in charge of these posts, how much do you control? And this is in 2009, remember, and it never got better. They would say, we control what my machine guns can reach to. That's it. The Taliban control everything else.
Wow.
So why didn't they get overrun? Well, there's 2 reasons. One is because of American air power. The Taliban never really wanted to mass their people because they'd be attacked by our attack helicopters, our A-10s, our B-1s, et cetera. The other reason, though, is because all these little bases we had out there, every year we're spending $1 million or $2 million to build wells, build schools, buy, whatever, and who was getting that money? The Taliban commanders. Their brothers were the ones who were the contractors building the schools. I remember in the province I was in, we were wondering why the school teachers weren't getting paid. Well, it was because the guy who was in charge of schools for Zabul province, his brother was a well-known Taliban commander in Wardak province. Where do you think that money went to? So it was like that type of thing. So getting back to the funding sources, that's number 3. Number 2, and it's kind of, I guess, arguable, at least when I remember the intelligence from this, from what I could observe and understand and read from our intelligence and our own assessments in the American government, was that 2 and 3 kind of at the same level, support from Pakistan. Right, of course, who we are supporting. So we're supporting Pakistan,
our ally, yes,
our ally, right? That whole thing. But the biggest supporters for the Taliban throughout this war that the United States has been in have been the Gulf monarchies, by far. The Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, the Kuwaitis. That is the biggest support for the Taliban. Ties in very nicely with what we know from WikiLeaks, right? Because, in WikiLeaks detailed very clearly in cables from the State Department and notes from Hillary Clinton and other people, top people at the State Department, that the major funder, the biggest supporter of al-Qaeda and Sunni terrorism was Saudi Arabia. And
so the Taliban's greatest funding sources, just to encapsulate it, are our allies, our contracts, and the opium trade that we helped to start.
That's right. And we sustain that our allies own. Exactly.